What is up, everybody? Palmer Tom's Rusty Mansell here, and it's game day, folks. It's a big one, rivalry weekend. Georgia Tech taking on the game tonight down at Bobby Dodd Stadium in Atlanta. It should be a night game, 7:30 kick. Not used to that one in this rivalry, at least recently. But should be an exciting one. Always is for this state. And Rusty, I'll give you first thoughts here because you're somebody that grew up in the state of Georgia. You know what this game means. Just the clean old fashioned hate. We've heard it all week from these players. It's a state championship. What does this mean to people in the Peach State?
It's been a minute since this game's had this kind of, a little bit of buzz to it. I'll be honest with you, I believe it was 88, 89, one of those. I was in high school, and it was the first time I'd ever left. Can't remember what actually year it was. First time I ever left Sanford Stadium and saw fans with some blows. And I was like, wait a minute, this game does mean a little more, and that was kind of an eye-opening experience for a 15 and 16-year-old, and I certainly don't condone that, but it kind of tells you what this rivalry has meant at times. And Georgia Tech certainly has found a way to beat Georgia a couple of times, but hadn't been recently. That Kirby's first year, and kind of an errant pass there from Jacob Eason kind of opened that thing up at the end, and just a sloppy game that first year. And in hindsight, you go back and you think of that game, and that was the reason that Nick Chubb said he was leaning to come back. He said he did not want that to be his last memory. So when you look at a Georgia Tech loss, which was very bad that day, but what it did kind of for the future, because if Georgia steamrolls Georgia Tech that day, maybe Nick Chubb says, "Look, done all I can do here," and Sonny Michel and those guys, who knows? But look at this game tonight, and it's got a little bit more, I'd say, edge around it because of Haynes King, the Georgia Tech quarterback. So I think it's going to be some Georgia Tech fans go into that stadium at least with a puncher's chance tonight, and I don't think that's been the case the last couple of years.
Yeah, and big credit to Brent Key for that. I mean,
Yeah.
last year we were talking about this game with Tech coming in at 5-6 and a chance to get bowl eligible. I don't think many people thought that they would. Coming into Athens as against the number one ranked team, but this year they are bowl eligible. They're 6-5 coming into this one. Listening to Brent Key this week, he said that they've got two goals in this program. One is to make a bowl. Two is to beat Georgia. They accomplished one already, and they'll have a chance tonight to go after that second one. And you're right, Brent Haynes King certainly has had an impact on this Tech program in his first year. He's the ACC's leading passer in terms of yardage and touchdowns, and he's been a difference maker for the Yellow Jackets. But obviously they've had some changes there as well. Buster Faulkner running that offense. We'll get into some of those final thoughts there with what that overlap may be. But first, let's talk injuries. That's a big storyline this week in Athens. Georgia coming off of a tough road win at Tennessee. Maybe not necessarily on the scoreboard, but you're certainly seeing it on the injury report. I think that we're all under the assumption that we're not going to see a lot of those guys, right, Rusty?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, it's kind of a risk reward. You know what I mean? Everybody knows 7 days from now what Georgia's staring down, and and I'll say this, you won't Lad McConkey, you won't Tate Ratledge, you want all those guys to play, but as you look back at last week, and Dylan Bell come in and certainly impacted the game, and Michael Morris is a guy that I don't think there's a ton of drop off. Tate Ratledge is a multi-year starter. He is a leader in the locker room. He's an older guy, but when you look at pound for pound, Michael Morris certainly can hold his own. He came in and played well on the road. And you just want those guys next week, but you're also building depth. Palmer, something we ain't talked a lot about. I know we've kind of been out of the loop a little bit with a holiday week, but the depth there with Dylan Bell and those guys getting confidence in big game environments. So you look at risk reward, and I think Georgia can be able to set these guys tonight and say, look, you just get yourself ready for next week, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Lad dealing with an ankle sprain or a tweaked ankle, as Kirby called it. You've got Ra Thomas dealing with a foot contusion. a bone bruise there. Tate dealing with banging knees there, and then there's one more. Warren Brinson, calf strain, that he didn't make the trip to Tennessee. So those are the 4 major injuries to major Georgia contributors. And the way that I look at it, and you're right, everyone knows what's ahead for Georgia. 7 days from now with another clash here in Atlanta. But the way that I look at it is like, you shouldn't need those guys to win this game. If you do need those guys to win this game, you got bigger problems. And so, in the case of Ladd McConkey, I was thinking about it this week, and to me, it reminds me a lot of the Javon Bullard ankle sprain from earlier this season. Suffered it in that second game against Ball State, and then warmed up for the South Carolina game the next week, did not play, sat out the UAB game entirely, and then he was back ready to roll when it mattered most against Auburn. And I think that's kind of the situation we're looking at with Ladd. Suffers it, tweaks it, against Ole Miss, warmed up. He played a little bit, but not for all intents and purposes. He didn't play last week against Tennessee. I think he's going to sit out this one where you can afford to sit him out and probably can go win without him. And then you need him back. You've got him back when you need him back. So I'm with you. And I think that you're looking at a team that has, taken on that next man up mentality all year long. And we saw it last week with Dylan Bell. Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint had a big game. I know you're high on him coming into this one. And, Micah Morris playing well as well. So, Georgia has the depth and the talent that they should be able to withstand a couple of those injuries, and still be able to get by fairly comfortably in this one. So I'm with you. I don't expect to see those guys play. Talking about guys that we are expecting to see play, matchups we're going to watch, matchups we're watching. I think I know where you're going to go with this one with how high you've been on Haynes King.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the Georgia Tech quarterback and how Georgia matches up against him?
Yeah, you got to stop his momentum with his legs. I mean, he can really hurt you there. Brady Cook hurt Georgia a couple of big explosive plays and moved the chains. And this is going to be this is going to be one of those games where Keith, those linebackers, they're going to spy him. You can't just rush up the field because, he's going to, not only can he throw a good deep ball, he can turn, the negative play into 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 yards. And you go back and you look at some of the Georgia Tech games that have been successful against Miami, against North Carolina, against Wake Forest, and some of those games, even some spots at Clemson. He has really hurt teams with his legs and deep ball. So at times he's been a little inaccurate, like I would say, like those middle intermediate throws. But if you give him time, or if you give him alleys to run in, he can move the chains. So it's going to be, Georgia's such a great tackling team. They have so much speed at linebacker. Looking forward to seeing C.J. Allen again tonight and what he does. And I'm interested to see how much they play Raylan Wilson tonight too, number 5, the true freshman out of Tallahassee, Florida. We know what Smile Monday can do. We're not expecting Pop Johnson to play tonight. Does Xavier Sorey play tonight? What does he do? But you look next week, and even as good as Haynes King is as an athlete, he's not Jalen Milroe. So he's not as big as Jalen Milroe. So you look at that and you kind of say, does Georgia get Raylan Wilson some reps tonight? Because those linebackers, as we transition after tonight, and we transition quickly into this Alabama matchup, I think the Georgia linebackers next week facing a very athletic quarterback, and how they play Haynes King tonight and how they do against him will kind of tell you a little bit of a sample size of what to expect next week.
Yeah, it's kind of perfect timing there in terms of getting that repetition and the practice against a quarterback like this. I circled Smile Munden as one of my players to watch for tonight. Along those same lines, Raylan Wilson fits that same model. A big athletic linebacker that can spy a quarterback, but can also go make plays and wreak havoc in the backfield. My matchup that I'm watching is a little bit of a sentimental one for Georgia. Dominic Blaylock on the opposite side. We talked to a couple players this week that were really excited to play him. Javon Bullard had some really great comments there. Said that, he said it was Dom was so nonchalant and yet so good. He was like, he said that he and Tyke Smith joked about it, with the matchups between Blaylock and the slot and those two guys at Star last season. He said that they would joke. It's like, man, Dom's not even trying and he's cooking us at practice. So, I think that, Brett Seither being a touchdown machine for this Tech offense at tight end, Dominic Blaylock being their second leading receiver. I'm very curious to see how those guys, these Georgia DBs and this Georgia defense matches up against those guys that they know so well and an offensive coordinator that they know so well. Malachi Starks was saying that, you see a lot of Todd Monken offense in this Buster Faulkner offense for Georgia Tech. And, there's crossover on the defensive side of the ball too. Kevin Scherer, the defensive coordinator for Tech, taking over halfway through the season after a disappointing loss for the Yellow Jackets earlier this season. So there's some crossover there, and I think that that's always something that's going to make for an interesting, coaches battle. But then you see it in the players as well, with the transfers and the impact that those guys are making for Tech. And the way that Georgia's going to try to shut them down. They know their games so well. And, I think that that's going to be a really interesting one to watch. Blaylock's the quiet guy. It wouldn't surprise me if he came out with a little bit of smack talk if he makes a play.
They're going to give him chances. Don Blaylock still talks and from what I understand, hangs out with a lot of Georgia players. You know what I mean? Those guys are very close. And tomorrow night, they'll be trying to win every battle, but Buster Faulkner kind of knows. He understands, and I would be shocked if they don't give Dom at least a couple of chances to put one in against his former teammates. And he is not he's not a talker, never has been, but he's got some what in his neck. You know what I mean? He's always had, and I expect Dom Blaylock to be pretty juiced up tonight.
Yeah, let's get into the final thoughts here. 7:30 kick. ABC under the lights at Bobby Dodd Stadium. I'm expecting a lot of Georgia fans, and I think that's kind of the expectation. Georgia hasn't lost in Atlanta since 1999. I was that would have been November of 99. I was 6 months old, guys. So making Rusty old as I say that, but also that should put into perspective. I am 24.
I'm talking about 89 in high school, and you're 6 months old, 99. So, little difference here.
Yeah. But I think that's the expectation. That's the norm in this series, that you're going to see a lot of red and black in the stands. The Tech fans that are there, they'll be fired up. They certainly understand the magnitude of this game and the opportunity that they have. If cards fall their way, I don't think that they're going to. I think that in a weekend that we're talking very big picture of the college football playoff and looking at some of these games, and people are already drawing up scenarios of, well, how does this team get in with this scenario or that scenario or whatever. I think that Georgia and Kirby Smart know that, it doesn't matter if they, none of it matters if they lose this game. I mean, you could lose this game and then go win the ICC championship and you're going to be in. But, all the scenarios about, well, if Georgia loses to Alabama, how are they getting in and what's their path? There is no path if you lose this one. And so, everybody understands it's an important rivalry to these coaches, to these players. I think that Georgia having a lot of Georgia alums on this staff means that it's really important to them. Brent Key being a Georgia Tech player and having some success against Georgia, it means it's important to him. He said he was, PO'd just hearing about, looking at the recent results in this series. So I think it's going to be an interesting one. I do like Georgia. And I think that you're probably, for as much as you may want to run up the score on your rival, I think that there's an understanding also of what's ahead next week, next Saturday, a week from tonight. And that we'll be looking at, probably some backups there in the third and fourth quarter. I think that the guys that are going to be in there, Rusty, you pointed this out in your ramblings today or yesterday, but I think it's going to be interesting to see what Mike Bobo does. And does he mix some things up? And, does he show something to give Alabama an extra look, something extra to look at, and think about and prepare for? or do they keep it very vanilla and just save what they've got? I think that you can do a little bit of both. And so interested to see what they can do. I think it's going to be a big night for the running backs. I told you guys, Smile Money was one of my players to watch. Dejan Edwards is another one. I really like the Peach State natives in this game. So I've got Georgia. I don't have Georgia covering just because I think it's going to be a little bit closer and maybe a little bit sloppier when those backups come in the game. But I think that they're going to come in a little bit earlier than you might expect. So I like Georgia to win and win comfortably, but 24 points is a lot.
Yeah. It's just one of those games that you hear the players talk about this week. Kirby mentioned it. Somebody asked Kirby in the press conference, I think on Monday, how do you rank this team? Is this your number one? And he made the comment like they're all big. He gave the coach speech, said this is a state championship and all that. But when you start talking to the players this week, they were all like, Kirby made sure we are aware of the history. So how do you make sure they're aware of the history? You show losses. You show what happened. And you show the history of Georgia teams losing this game and lets them know, what happens afterwards and how big a game this is for not only alumni, but this is one of those games where Kirby's smart. This is kind of what separates him as an elite coach. He gets his team to understand how big a game this is and to tuck next week away until this game is over. And I expect a focused Georgia team. I expect a too much Georgia team. I've seen this before where Georgia just starts doing this right here. They just start getting better, and they're starting to get better, and they have been getting better. So you look at this game and how many plays that gentleman played tonight. I would imagine if they get out to a good lead at 19, he's going to be over there. He's going to be over there with a towel on his head early this week. So I think Georgia handles business. I think Georgia wins 41-13. I think that Tech's going to get some yards. I think they're going to make an explosive play here or there. But at the end of the day, Georgia Tech's defense is a problem, and Georgia's offense is a problem for most of the teams been facing them right now. I expect them to turn this thing loose, spread the ball around, run up and down the field. I think their rushing game can get going. I think Georgia's going to have 2 or 3 big explosive type touchdowns. I do think this is going to be a game for a half. I think it's going to be closer than people think. It's just Tech's going to be – there's going to be a good Tech crowd tonight. But at the end of the day, third and fourth quarter, that depth takes over, and Georgia's reserves. I think you're going to see a lot of guys in that fourth quarter getting some action. But I think Georgia wins this 41-13.
And making it closer, Tech's going to score on their first drive. That's just a given.
Oh, man.
It's a given at this point, 5 games in a row. So
No doubt.
Well, that's all we got for y'all tonight. Today, you can come check us out. Check back in with us tonight after the game. We'll be doing a post-game show. Could be coming to you pretty late. 7:30 kick ABC, like we said. And then after this one, it's on to Alabama. And we turn the page pretty quickly. We'll be back tomorrow, Sunday night, 8 o'clock for the Georgia show. Monday for Bark After Dark, Wednesday for another edition of the Georgia Show. We'll be hearing from Kirby 4 out of 5 days, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. And then, there's players interviews, there's, media personalities. It's a big week. We're less than a month away from signing day, and recruiting goes on the back burner here for this week, but, You do not want to be missing out. So come check us out over at DawgsHQ. Join the family. We'd love to have you. $1 for 1 month. Give us a try. And we'd like to believe that you won't regret it. So that's it for Palmer Toms and Rusty Mansell. This has been the Georgia Game Day Show.